Hello, everybody. Dave Neal here, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. In this wild video on a Friday afternoon, we have Madi Prewett defending purity culture in a wild podcast. I call it wild because they use biblical words I haven't heard of. It sounded like I was watching a show that took place in the late 1800s. It is wild. Now, purity movement, I'm going to read this straight off of a New York Times definition. The purity movement introduced a purity industry with purity rings and purity pledges and purity balls and purity reels and TikToks and purity sermons. It's a new ritual aimed at encouraging girls and young women to abstain from sex until marriage. The ritual itself isn't new, but with social media, it's kind of had this resurgence. And for some reason, look, I think we should be talking about feeding the poor and housing the homeless and things like that. But instead, all we seem to be talking about is shaming people for having sex before they, I don't know, put one of these things on their fingers. You fornicated before you put one of these, you know what I mean? Anyway, it's ridiculous, this conversation I'm going to share for you. That's my opinion. It's a commentary channel. Follow me on Instagram at DNeals. Patreon.com/Dave Neal, where you can donate to my channel. And also every afternoon, Bachelor Rush Hour, the podcast. We'll get into it over there. So we're going to jump over here and listen to what a pastor said on a podcast they were on, and then I'll share their response right after.
I don't know. I kind of have like a little bit of a sore spot on like some of the now full circle bad mouthing of the so-called purity culture. Like, oh, it's like it's some sort of terrible thing to point young men and women to hold out for God's best. When in reality, like you're an example of, hey, look, this is possible. You can hold out for God's best. Like it is best to save sex for marriage. It is wonderful. So, you know,
I don't know if saying that saving yourself for marriage is the toxicity that is purity culture. It's the shame that comes with it, because we're not saying this to an adult. Hey, you shouldn't have sex till marriage, which of course would be weird to say to an adult, right? But we're saying it to 10-year-olds, to 8-year-olds, to 14-year-olds. We're saying your body's changing. And as we know, clinical psychologists have talked about this, but as we know, young women, as they go through puberty, deal with a lot more self-hate because their body's changing in a world that views them on their body. Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, look at those eyes. All compliments that young ladies get are generally focused in the direction of their looks and appearance and the stress that is involved there. So let's let him finish.
Like the dismissing of that as some horrible thing, when obviously we're not trying to shame anybody for the mistakes. And Grant, you're by your own.
We're not trying to shame anybody. Shame people for what? Mistakes. You did wrong. You made a mistake. You angered God. So then he mentions the fact that Grant wasn't a virgin before they got married.
Mission saying, hey, I've been out there, did the things the world's way, but you're saying God can redeem. So it's always best to do things God's way, but it's also, no matter where you've been and what you've done, possible to see God make all things new. So it's both and, right?
Yeah.
All right, so anyway, it didn't take more than scrolling 3 comments to hear a different opinion. I find it interesting because I never hear men talking about how purity culture affected them. But every woman I know is shamed and felt it was used as a weapon against her. So do I believe what God says about sex being intended only for marriage? Of course, but there's grace. However, in purity culture, the grace bit was left out. I remember being told I'd be like a half-eaten bar of chocolate where each person I slept with had taken a bite out of me, so no one would want me if I didn't stay a virgin. It was a fear tactic used to manipulate and control, not to truly teach the word of God. Meanwhile, girls next to me had never had the choice of virginity because they had been abused and now were being told they had no worth. I also have friends that the shame-based teaching was so intense they felt bad about having sex even within the confines of marriage, and it deeply affected their marriage. It's the collateral damage that exists, which we're going to get to in a second. Now, you might be wondering, why does this all matter? You know, like I've got family that believes in plenty of different doctrines that I disagree with, but Grant comes from a dangerous place. Not him specifically, but his lineage. His father, Kenny Trout, was one of the biggest funders in Trump's social media platform, Truth Social. And why should we care that there's another social, network that's out there? It's just a little bit much that he has the wealth as a billionaire to fund political campaigns that in some instances in Texas are stripping away the rights of people in the autonomy of their own body. This is scary stuff, folks. So what's going to be preached over there at the new church that they're at? We're going to have to wait and see. Trump's purported free speech social media platform, Truth Social, is hiding users' posts, threatening to create a curated echo chamber. So that's what we have here, right? I believe we have an echo chamber of people when this pastor, who I'm sure means well, talks about, hey, we should just have sex till marriage, not understanding the collateral damage that exists out there because you're talking to 10-year-olds. You're talking to children about this. You're making them put on some of these purity rings to say, I'm not going to do this. And then if they do, then they've sinned and you can, overcome the grand mistakes you've made. So it doesn't go long without we see these kind of comments from people saying, I was shamed and had to leave the church. The church needs to be more inclusive if it wants to keep people. So of course, people like Madi have created a sort of big business. She makes a lot of money giving speeches about how she waited. She put it on her dang veil, worth the wait. She said that before she even metaphorically crossed the finish line, you know what I mean? So it's fascinating and scary, and Madi's no stranger to social media, of course. She was blasted for making her own fan account and commenting, oh, so genuine and so real, and then she denied that it was her. And of course, Nick Vile slammed her. Here's what we know. Nick Vile said, people want to forget. I know Madison wants to forget it, but her Instagram, she commented on her own Instagram. She did that. That was a fact. It is silly and trivial, and there's a logical explanation for it, that she wanted people to like her. Look, we all want people to like us. We all do stupid things. Madi denied it and said her friend stole her phone, took her phone and commented from her account. But either way, she probably had a burner account where she was hyping herself up. I don't know. How does that have to deal with this? They're using social media to reach a large audience, and that's what purity culture is doing. It's not just your dad putting on a suit and tie and you putting on a dress at the age of 12 and pledging not to have sex till marriage. Now it's people that are like creating this hot culture of, this sexy young culture where they're preaching what I believe to be is just like a weird thing, which is like telling people what they should and shouldn't do with their body based on fearing or not fearing God. So let's go to what Grant said about why it was worth it to wait with Madison. Very interesting stuff here.
Fought through that, right? And didn't cave.
So glad. And I'm looking at, so my best friends will look at me who are single.
He said he's so glad he fought through it and didn't cave to the pressures of having sex with Madi before someone told them they could have sex.
And they'll go, Grant, why was it worth it? And I'm just going, bro, the freedom and the confidence it brings as a man in Christ to lead in purity, I think is the most important thing as a single man.
And everything he says feels like a script or scripture.
Because, there were moments where we would start making out and maybe we got a little handsy, and what I would feel the next day, stripped of confidence, stripped of boldness. All of a sudden, I'm not leading her well.
Stripped in confidence, stripped in boldness.
Yeah, and I think my tongue got looser. My tongue lashed out.
His tongue got loose! Ladies and gentlemen, Grant Trout's tongue. Hey, can you bring it back? We lost Grant Trout's tongue. Please, it got loose. What the hell are we talking about? What words are these? Brimstone and fire. My tongue is loose. I tell you. I'll tell you what, having your tongue get loose might be a benefit to, when you actually do have sex. Ladies like it when the tongue's a little loose.
I said this thing where Satan promises this beautiful little box of pleasure. And he says, hey, take this. It's just a little bit. You're not going to go all the way. Just take a little bit. And it promises unity. But every single time, and we didn't do anything crazy, but we crossed a line we knew we shouldn't have. It promised unity. And it only caused
what line did you cross? Did you tickle her ass? What did we?
Biggest fights.
What's that like? What does God say? Leviticus says you may not tickle an ass.
It only
or shall you tickle one's ass? Your tooth may get loose. You may
cause division.
Tongue too.
And Satan swears. He says, "Hey, just take it. It'll bring you closer." But really, that just divided us, and so we took that very seriously.
And the people in the background commenting, yeah, it's wild to me.
Yeah. Well, and even like,
much wisdom.
It's not marriage.
So much wisdom. So much wisdom. Look, and again, the commenters that disagree with me will say, Dave, who are you to care what other people do with their body? That's my point. So why should they care what other people do with their body? You know what I mean? So, Dave, let them be. It's the fact that they've got millions of followers, tax exempt. And this is the craziness that people are listening to. The hell do I care? I don't care. I'm married. I had sex before marriage, during marriage. My tongue's loose. Well, I guess he's got a point. I got a loose tongue. Manic Dave over here with a loose tongue. So let's go to 3538. Oh, let's keep playing.
Purity until marriage. It's purity in marriage too. You know, like
No
it's
doubt.
not like that ends now.
All right, so 45. I know we want to hear what Maddie has to say. I haven't even listened to the whole thing. I'm sure every moment here is just wildness. But we're going to give them a fair shot. We're going to listen to what their pastor is saying. But I did want to share also, we have an article here. The former pastor of the church that they belong in was kicked out of the church for being bipolar. Now, the church elders, that's what they're called, not here. If I do this long enough, I'll be a recap elder. The recap elder Dave. The church elders kicked this guy out. We'll get to that in a second. Stick around, guys. Stick around, okay? Let's hear what Maddie has to say.
And I brought a few friends with me. And so I kind of went into college, hoping to just continue to do life with them. But I remember some of them started going in different directions, and they started making some decisions that I felt like were a bit out of character for them. And
I have an aunt who used to do this to me. She said, Dave, you're doing something out of character. I remember an aunt shaming me for laughing a certain way. So Maddie's basically saying her friends started doing things out of character. Maybe your friends decided to not live to a standard that they didn't want to live to anymore, and they became their own.
Remember, I had a decision to make in that moment, and I got alone in my dorm room, and I just started crying, and I was like, Lord, like, who do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to live? And do I really want to go all in with you? And I just remember in that moment, I was like, I do. Like, I don't want anything apart from you. And I've kind of lived this like lukewarm, mediocre Christian lifestyle, and it's gotten me nowhere. And I'm ready to go all in with you.
And then she went all in with a dating show that is literally the exact opposite of monogamy. And that's the world we live in, folks. All right. So anyway, let's go to the 49-minute mark here where we're at. I mean, hey, give her credit. I mean, look, again, I don't care what people do with their body as long as they're not hurting other people and all that. I'm all about just like doing what's right for you. The problem I have here is the people that are going to listen to her and then fall short or be abused or have, like we said before, all these instances where maybe you had your virginity taken from you and now you think you're less of a person because of an act someone else did. There's so many different instances where this is toxic. It's not about what Maddie does with her body. I hope they have great loose tongue sex. What do I care?
So that was, my story, and then came off the show, and obviously my whole life looks crazy and different. And I was just like, okay, Lord, what do you want with all of this? And, I had people reaching out to me about writing a book and coming and speaking at different conferences and churches. And it all just really just took off there.
So writing a book, speaking at conference and churches, doing all the things that just put money into her pocket.
Girl, she don't know.
So here's the pastor of their church. Maybe it's the fact that as a stand-up comedian, you understand the different like neuro-linguistic programming that can go into selling a joke on stage, the different phonetics, hitting words on certain accents, all the things that can make someone a good auditor or a dictator, someone who can really hammer their point across. The pastor does a really good job with that. The problem I have is it's always just like, and again, it's always just like so clean, so like I'm hip, I'm cool, I'm one of you guys. He's got the Jesus mic, that you only see as pastors and in Broadway. I should get one of them. I really should. But either way, it's no knock on him. But let's just hear what he has to say. This is the church that Grant now works at, Harris Creek Baptist Church. And then we'll get into afterwards how that church kicked out this pastor and how this pastor struggles with his mental health, rather than addressing it, how they just kind of kicked him out.
Anyone that will have sex outside of marriage is communicating something really clearly and really plainly. I am willing to go outside of marriage for sex.
Now, I have to assume we're not talking about cheating, okay? When we talk about cheating, of course, if you're in a relationship where the preconceived notion is that you're monogamous, like I'm in a monogamous relationship, we trust in each other that we are not cheating on each other and all of that jazz, right? When he says outside of marriage, I have to assume that what he's saying is sex before marriage, because I think we can all assume, yeah, if you're going to have sex outside of marriage, that's wrong. So unless someone tells me otherwise, I'm assuming he's talking about sex before marriage.
That's what they're saying. And so don't be surprised when that happens, because they're trying to tell you that really plainly. Listen, there's the marriage covenant. I don't value the marriage covenant.
So he's saying if people have sex outside of marriage, then they don't value the marriage covenant, which I don't really follow the logic, but he really does a good job of sticking his point. You'll hear it at the end. He rehearsed it in the mirror. He nails it.
I'm not going to wait for the marriage covenant. I'm going to do what I want to do. I follow my emotions. That's what you need to know about me. I do what my emotions tell me to do, what my feelings tell me to do. I want to follow them. And so if I'm willing to not hold sex in that place where God says it's reserved for it, I'm telling you.
He's building up, kind of like coming. He's like ready to come with his point.
I'm willing to go outside of that for intimacy. And there's only one reason that someone will do that. It's because they don't fear God.
Boom, boom, boom. There's only one reason why they would do that. It's because they don't fear God. You know what I mean? He kind of hits it right there.
Anyone that will have sex outside of marriage is communicating something.
And that's what he's spewing to people, saying, I'm sure when it's not there are so many ways that scripture can be used to teach good morality. And like I said before, feed the poor and help those that have less than us. But all we see here is Grant, son of a billionaire, throwing their money at political campaigns, now working for a church where they're saying, if you have sex outside of marriage, I'm assuming before marriage, then it's because you don't fear God. They're hiding it in plain sight, that the fear of God is the reason that should compel you to do certain things.
Really clearly and really plainly.
And maybe I'm just a Catholic school reject here. Catholic Dave. But anytime anyone tries to sell me something on fear, well, if you don't put this on your roof's going to cave in. Well, if you don't do this, the world's going to burn down. Well, if you don't do that, anytime you're being sold on fear, you have to realize the immigrants are going to steal your job. They're coming up in droves. The migrant caravan's on its way. Do you know the migrant caravan's on its way, guys? Whenever we're being sold on fear, we are being manipulated in the easiest form possible. Because if we're afraid of something, we'll do anything to act against that fear. This is just like Cult 101.
I am willing to go outside of marriage for sex. That's what they're saying. And so don't be surprised when that happens, because they're trying to tell you that really plainly. Listen, there's the marriage covenant. I don't value the marriage covenant. I'm not going to wait for the marriage.
Bye, loser.
Okay, so anyway, we've got this guy. He was the Christian pastor at the same church, Brady Herbert. He left the church in Texas after he was diagnosed with bipolar II disorder. And he talks about his experience of how the elders made clear to him that he would not be allowed to return as lead pastor. When they got a whiff of mental health issues, who's now 37, they wanted to wash their hands of it and move on, like a lot of churches do. So these churches aren't addressing the mental health issues that may come from you just being predisposed to mental health problems, like he may be, but also the issues that come up when you say, like they do say, oh, no, we're not here to shame others, but let's do the things that are going to shame them. Do you know what I mean? So it's just one thing after another. Let's see here. So he left the church and he's no longer with the church. And that's where that church went. Now, look, I'm not saying this is a bad church. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm just saying we don't know when people get all of their information from like a source that's telling them that God's you need to be afraid of the power and this and that. Love is the opposite of fear, right? To love something is not to be afraid of something. To love something is to have the highest vibrancy possible. People are attracted to love. So you can love God. For me, God is all of us. We're all part of it. Why vicariously, when you see someone else get hurt, it hurts you, because we all feel each other's pain. We all feel each other's joy. They always say, when you do a good act for somebody, you release the feel-good hormones, and so do that other person. But likewise, a stranger watching you do a good act to somebody else also feels that love. That's what we need to be talking about, not fear that you may bang somebody and have a loose lip before you get married.
When Monica and I got married 18 years ago, we moved into her little apartment, and she went out of town for a weekend to see a friend. And I had a friend coming through town from college, a buddy from college. And so he says, hey, do you want to grab dinner? And so he and I went to dinner. We're catching up over chips and queso, having a great time. And this woman walked up to us, and she was perfect, physically beautiful. Everything was in the right place. And she turns to me and says, "Can I buy you a drink?"
Shorty, can I
And
buy
I say,
you a
"Oh,
drink?"
I'm married." Like that.
Fair.
And she says, "Well, is she here?"
Oh.
Because I don't care. And I hardly know any Bible, but I know Proverbs 5, 6, and 7. The only thing, the saving grace in that situation is I looked at that woman and I thought, oh, she hates me. She doesn't love me. She wants my wife to hate me. And she wants my in-laws to hate me. And she wants my parents to hate me. And she wants my unborn children to hate me.
Just say no to the drink and get your own Shirley Temple. All right, there was one more I wanted to play for you guys. One more, and then I promise we'll be done.
There is going to be temptation for the...
That's not the one I wanted. Hold on one second, folks. Where did it go? I had one more. It involved Taylor Swift. Whenever you have a Taylor Swift one, all right, you know what? Maybe I'll just end it there. I'll end it there. Look, I always have to think about how anyone who gets upset with my point of view, I just challenge them and say, look, pastors, they can share what they want about putting the fear of God into people. I just have to remind people, whether it's a door-to-door salesman who tells you, who tries to sell you on fear to buy a product. Jiffy Lube does this all the time. They show you your filter. Your car's about to explode if you don't get a new filter. You know what I mean? We have to calm down. You're gonna get hives if you don't hit the like button on my channel right now. If you don't join the Patreon, you probably will, have a bad day. It's a chain mail. Forward this to 7 people, or you're gonna be cursed for life. I don't know, folks. To me, preaching what Jesus wanted, unity, helping the poor. Those are the types of things, not funding campaigns for political donations that strip away body autonomy, not making a new generation of people hate their bodies because maybe they got a hand job before they were morally supposed to. That's just where I stand. Those are my opinions. We talk about it and we'll continue to talk about it as long as people continue to, I think, spread a dangerous way of life. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment. We'll talk to you later.